everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am Bond, and I'm here with my cohort, Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing all right. I do have an small exciting announcement. I have been immortalized, and truly the only way that matters in the medium of polka. My friend Ron Pivovar just released a new record, and track number 9 is Pennsylvania Nick. So
what
I
an
will live
honor.
on in perpetuity.
It's finally
I'm
happened.
very excited about that. It's finally happened.
And
Congrats.
speaking of things that have finally happened, we are here with our friend Susan Fair. How you doing, Susan?
Good. Good to see you guys again.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are pumped to have you back. I know we've been talking for a while about getting you back on the show. We had you on, I was going to say a few months ago. I'm sure at this point it's been over a year to talk about,
Yeah.
to talk about Western Maryland folklore. And we had a wonderful time during that conversation, got a lot of good feedback. And I learned a lot, and we really appreciated how how nitty gritty you got with a lot of the details and a lot of your research in such a small, just a few counties. And that was just something that I think really all vibed on. Definitely kindred spirits in that sense.
Definitely. Fun
Um,
topic.
we wanted to have you back because whenever we were getting ready for that episode, I purchased one of the books you had previously written called American Witches, and really, really enjoyed it. And before that episode, I mentioned to Nick about it and everything, and we both kind of got to reading. And this is such a good book. Like we're gonna say it 1,000 times tonight. This is such a good reading book.
Oh,
Um, and
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
yeah, and so we basically had to have you back on at some point here to talk about this book as well, because we really think that not only would people enjoy reading it themselves, and hopefully this will entice them to do so, but in a field where there is just there's a lot of books on American witches. There's a lot of books on witchcraft and the history of it and everything. I think it's really a special offering in that space, as they say. So we just kind of want to dive into that tonight and talk about some of your process and everything. Just kind of see where the conversation takes us. So Nick, do you want to
Sounds good.
kind of kick us off here?
I would. I feel like we're on firing line just because I'm going to have a very long first question here.
Uh-oh.
So bear
I'll
with
take
me.
notes.
Yes, take notes.
Well, I know Brendan and we have read and recorded a lot of 19th century newspaper articles,
Mhm.
and some of them are wonderfully bizarre. And I know before we started recording, you said the research is the best part in many ways. And I agree because just finding and connecting stories. But I remember a couple such as a boy that had a snake live inside of him for 2 years and they coaxed it out with a whistle, or a man
Sounds about
fighting.
right.
Yeah. Or a man had a 3 mile fight with an eagle.
Sounds
You
about
just,
right. Yep, I think
yeah.
I encountered.
Who
And
hasn't? Who hasn't? Yeah.
And for this book, you were digging back a couple centuries earlier than that yet. And there are fantastical stories. When you were going through this, or when you're doing any research going back to these texts, what is your thought process like when you're trying to discern what is true or what is probable? I'm really curious.
hmm well, I would say basically I try to deal with primary sources as much as possible. And, if I just come across something in another book, that sounds like an interesting fact, I want to try to confirm it I want to backtrack, even if they have it like a footnote or it's in the bibliography. I want to go back and find that source that it came from, and ideally a second confirmation too. Because sometimes you'll come across like a little scrap of something that seems really important, and when you go back to try and actually find where they got that from, you can't always find it. So I've encountered that a few times lately.
When reading this book, one of the stories that there's a small excerpt, and if you don't mind, if I could read just a couple sentences,
Sure.
that this is with one I was like, I can only imagine reading the text and trying to sort through like what is probable here, what is going on, and this is with the concerning a bewitched Goodwin children, Martha.
Mhm.
Martha's stay with the Mathers grew even stranger when the girl acquired an invisible horse, which she would mount and charge furiously through the house upon. Sometimes she would take her phantom horse ride while seated in a chair, and the girl and horse chair shaking as if in a mad gallop, often without her feet touching the floor. So if I were reading, again, going to that
Yeah.
primary source, I was reading that, I would think, well, here's a child with this imagination, but that is not how, again, this child was saying with Cotton Mather, and
Hmm.
that's a historical figure I think a lot of people know only for the Salem witch trials, but
Hmm.
he and that whole family were really influential in early pre-American Puritan
Right,
society. How,
for
like,
sure.
his interpretation is so colored.
Hmm. And I mean, that was like literally from his book that he wrote about this case, which was the Goodwin case out of Boston. And that was like 3 years before Salem. And he had gotten like he heard about like a witch that had possessed or cursed or bewitched, I guess, these four children out of six in the house. And he got right in there and went to their home and wasn't content with just watching the kids do enact these bewitched behaviors in their home. He actually took the oldest daughter to his house. I like imagining his poor, long-suffering wife, bringing him this possessed girl, possessed 13-year-old, indefinitely to kind of experiment on her, if you will. And that is one of the most interesting things I find in, especially in the Salem and the other New England witch stories, is that things are, like very strange, impossible things are being reported like firsthand by credible people. Say that they like at another point this girl flies across the floor, like it's across the floor like a goose, but with her feet barely touching the floor at any time, like just like the tip of her toe touching the floor at one point. But
And I think of like a goose taking
hmm
flight off the water and how they
hmm
have their feet extended. That was the
right,
image when I was
Which
reading
is
it.
hmm
Yeah.
creepy. Which is creepy.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah, all kinds of stuff like that, and like the girls being pulled into the fire by
Oh my goodness.
yes, by this demonic force or by the devil, or and
Yeah. And
he's trying to
protesting the
pour out,
whole way.
yeah. Hmm. So that's one thing, and there were a lot of those cases with the actual Salem witch trials that just full of crazy details. I mean, like ghosts attended quite a few of the trials. You never knew who was going to
Mhm.
show up, but it's just reported that four of George Burroughs' dead wives, or like appearing with sheets wrapped around them and listening to the testimony, that kind of thing. I don't think it was really four dead
Well,
wives. It might have been two, but
either way, I mean, I have just two quick questions. Well, a comment and a question, and then I'll have to hand it over to Brendan before I just start monopolizing all the questions here for you. But I mean, the Cotton Mather looms large, especially in the first half.
hmm
And of course, he's written so much about the subject in his, contemporarily, and that
hmm
influenced how he was perceived at the time and certainly how we perceive him today. I'm really curious, the question being, how much do you think this is Cotton Mather inserting himself or trying to make himself kind of putting himself on a
hmm
pedestal of
hmm
sorts? Because, I'm trying to think of just the right words to
yeah,
say,
I
but
think it main character syndrome, we might
yeah.
call it.
Well, I think about that with him and his father.
hmm
Not, I didn't
hmm
know this. Something of a hypochondriac or always on the cusp
hmm
of death in his own mind.
Exactly, exactly. I probably would have been like that too back then.
Right. A lot of
But
lot of opportunities.
I know one of the things Cotton Mather really disliked about being a minister was having to go visit the sick
I
and
remember. Yeah, I
dying
remember you
people.
mentioning it in the book.
I mean,
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
it makes me cringe to think of, having to like,
Hmm.
at times he would have to go like onto a ship that was at the docks, because there was like smallpox or something going around, and give people last rites and all. And he was not happy about that. He made no secret of that. He did
I mean, like
not enjoy that.
yeah, like if someone's coughing too much, I leave. So like, yeah,
Mhm.
I like,
Yeah.
I just wouldn't. Yeah, I can empathize with Cotton Mather in that
Mhm.
sense.
He's ready to fight the devil, but he does not
So
want
Right.
what
anything
I'm
to do
hearing,
with it,
yeah.
with germs.
But when I'm hearing his descriptions of like some of these incidents, I'm wondering
Hmm.
how much of this is him again
Well,
trying
that's
to,
Hmm.
to put himself forward and trying
Hmm.
to sell the story in a way.
right,
Right.
and that's kind of one of the questions I had, Susan, about kind of what you were getting at as well, Nick. Whenever you're looking back this far, and especially with the Salem witch trials, and again, the book covers like a large history of
Hmm.
witches in America. We're just right now kind of concentrating on the Salem witch trials because they're such an interesting subject on their own
Hmm.
right. Um, but yeah, you have Cotton Mather's diary and his accounts, and you have other locals
Hmm.
giving their subjective takes on things. But then you also have, court proceedings and you have church records in these cases.
Hmm.
So you have on the plus side, you have a lot of sources that can be covering some of these things, but all of them kind of have their own bend to them. Like with something like Cotton Mather, he might be a little first person syndrome esque.
Hmm.
Uh, the church is going to think everything is a demon or the
Hmm.
devil.
Hmm.
And then the courts are going to be somewhere probably in between, where depending on who is actually doing the recording, what some of the precedents are, it can lean a few different ways. But so like how did you kind of navigate the kind of getting to like the heart of what was probably actually going on in these cases? Because I think in the book you do what seems to me to be an excellent job of being like, here's what people say happened, here's what is probably going on in these situations.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like how did you navigate those different sources kind of conflicting possibly, or did they not
Hmm.
conflict,
Well, as far as like the like really out there things, for example, Cotton Mather's descriptions of things that the bewitched children were doing. I mean, like just to like randomly look at a sentence from that book of his, he describes the kids saying their tongues would be drawn down their throats. Another while, they would be pulled out upon their chins to a prodigious length. They would have their mouths opened into such a wideness that their jaws went out of joint, and anon they would clap together again with force like that of a strong spring lock. Basically, he describes like heads spinning around and
Right.
everything
It's,
else.
it's straight out of a modern horror movie. It
Right,
really
right.
is. Yeah.
See, I
And
was thinking this is the rare medical condition known as Gene Simmons syndrome. I've seen this before.
it could be that could be the start of it all. And sometimes there are more than one. Well, in this case, in this book, he claims that very respectable citizens, like he'll say, like no fewer than 10 respectable citizens witnessed
Hmm.
this also. But in other cases, there are other people who witness these things too. Or not like the same things he's saying, but like a bizarre original things like the ghosts in the courthouse.
Right.
Like somebody, goody so and so's familiar is like sitting up in the rafters during the church service and this kind of stuff. And I tend to take it at face value as much as I can, as far as like the really out there stuff, and just assume that it was real to them, I
Hmm.
guess you could
Right.
say. But a lot of the people, such as Captain Mather, had their own interests in certain people being witches.
Right.
And so then, that definitely casts more doubt. But then you have someone who's very colorful character, who obviously, like Cotton Mather, must think, if he's telling a big lie, that God knows he's telling a big lie.
Right,
And
right.
that was like pretty much the main, plot of the Puritans' lives, was
Right.
to getting good with God constantly, no matter what you had to do or sacrifice. So I love like the creepy details because like some of these stories are just absolutely creepy. The things that people say they see, you know, and people have like pigs materializing in their house or like goody so and waking up in the middle of the night and goody so and so sitting on their chest, trying to strangle
Hmm.
them. But a lot of really creepy details. And that's part of what makes it so interesting. But it's also part of what makes it interesting is why they would have that in have an interest in exaggerating things or making things up.
Well, and one of the quickly stories that's in there that really made me question, and I'll have to share what really my perspective of
Hmm.
history changed a bit reading this, is of the woman who Goody, not Goody Cole. I'm trying to remember her name right now, but it was said by Mather that she only spoke Irish, but yet
Hmm.
made a confession to her,
I
and
think that
Right.
was
yet he
Goody
didn't
Goody
understand.
Glover, Goody Glover or
Thank
Glover.
you,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, I
Yes.
think that's her. Yeah.
And so already, like he can't see in his own story that there's some discrepancies. But
Hmm.
what really impressed me reading these histories is that, so much has been said about the Salem witch trials, and a lot of people say, well, it was like a public delirium. Some people say it was caused by, I think it's ergot, some
People love talking about
Yeah,
ergot poisoning.
yeah, I
right.
know.
But for me, this didn't just spring out. There are all these events. There are years, and with a colorful figure and a great writer like Mather, he really does paint some
Hmm.
imagery.
Hmm.
There is, and it's not just with the witches. There's talk about him being the young reverend and being very colorful, and some people being put off
Hmm.
by it.
Right.
There's like this. There's a build to what would become like the Salem moment.
Right.
uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
that really reshaped how I see some of the history is reading all this, and I have come to think of these witch accusations. I always did before, but more so now, reading about bewitched meant
Hmm.
upon ships, and I think about how
Yeah.
bold and daring sea travel was, and you mentioned how long it can take. And
Right.
you see those old masted ships and are just teeter-tottering about in the waves
Hmm.
for months.
For months on end.
I think of the witch as a scapegoat, and I mean a scapegoat in the most traditional sense, where
Hmm.
Right.
there's perplexing things, there's bad fortune, and we are throwing the guilt of the clan upon this animal and sending it into the desert. And we have had a troubling voyage, and so we have found this figure, and we are going to chain them down in the bottom of the ship. It's terrifying.
Hmm.
Hmm. Hmm. Or in some cases, uh, hang them right on the ship. I mean, they did
Right.
that with,
Right. Right.
with one old woman on her way to the like Virginia colonies. So
I
yeah.
I think about the people often that came over, and you have to figure that you were either foolish, irrationally certain of
Hmm.
yourself, or had nothing else to
Hmm.
lose that you
Which
would
is
make that
absolutely
trek.
desperate to leave England or Ireland or wherever. Yes.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, like real life was scary enough to me, and like they don't need to
Hmm.
embellish. I mean, because I could also read the stories, of the pilgrims, the pilgrims coming over in
Hmm.
1620 and all the things they faced and all. That's
Yeah.
terrifying
Oh, I'd be dead
too.
without indoor plumbing.
I know.
Right.
Can you imagine refrigeration? Uh,
Well, and it's wild, and I think what you're saying there too, Nick, is important because, like in the book, I think it shows how the scapegoat of the witch in as a the utility of that, about letting off like societal steam almost whenever bad things are happening, is like, again, really tragic, but it sets up a trope in society. So I think this book does a good job too of showing that, like, when you get to things like the Salem witch trials, you're right, like you said, it is a building. It's not like it is just out
Right.
of nowhere. And that is a mischaracterization, that just one
Hmm.
day there were just witches everywhere, apparently.
Right.
And now that we have this cultural trope in existence of like, oh, when bad things or weird things are happening, it must be a witch in town. That gives the nefarious and the self-absorbed and, narcissistic people that are trying to find ways of getting one up on their neighbors. It gives them an outlet for that.
Hmm.
There's something that exists now. They can just go, oh, this person whose property I want or whose business I want,
Hmm.
let's just say they're a witch,
Hmm. Hmm.
because that seems to be the case for a lot of these
Right.
folks, especially in Salem. But again, I know we keep saying Salem, and this happened
Hmm.
everywhere,
Right.
but it sure seems like there was a lot of land grabs going on in Salem at the same time as the witch
Definitely.
trials.
And
Well,
and
go
as
ahead.
it kind of rolled along, as people were being charged, new people would get charged. There was a lot of they weren't people who started out saying, but it was like they kind of glommed on to this. Okay,
Hmm.
people are starting to accuse George Burroughs of stuff, and George Burroughs is like a secret Baptist, and we don't like him here. You know, he calls himself
Right.
a minister, but he doesn't have all of his kids baptized, which I think he really just kind of couldn't keep up with it because he had so many.
Yeah,
But
I was going to say.
yeah, they all they all did. But
I was
yeah.
also surprised by the anti-Quaker sentiment. I didn't realize how
Hmm.
strong that was at the time. But I'm going to ask
Yes.
each of you, though. I am curious, and I'll start with you, Miss Susan. As you obviously you came into this book, you're doing a lot of research leading up to this. Um, did your Secret Baptist is a great band. How did did your view of history or any historical figures evolve as a byproduct of the research that you did going into this?
Like someone like Cotton Mather is like would be easy to hate him because he basically, to my thinking, he's responsible for
Hmm.
a lot of
Hmm.
deaths of innocent people. He was self-absorbed, annoying. He had these fundamentalist religious views, but he had, I think it was a total of 15 children, and most of them died. I think he ended up with like six, maybe, who were still alive
Hmm.
when he passed away. He was so terrified of such a hypochondriac and so terrified of these diseases that would come around and kill everybody. He actually started, like, he was responsible for some very early trials of like smallpox vaccines.
Hmm.
And he was like persecuted for that. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
like people were throwing rocks through his window.
There
And
are
like,
two things about him that I found
mhm,
interesting. His
mhm,
one, his I was surprised that he would be open to those
right.
inoculations, and also that he was so open to periwigs or just
Oh,
wearing of
yes.
wigs.
Yes,
Like I
apparently.
thought, like,
Yeah. Mhm,
yeah, what a
mhm,
moderate stance. I wasn't expect.
mhm.
If anybody, I would have expected Samuel Sewell to have
Yeah.
gone the
Hmm.
moderate route.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
I
I just
apologize
love
for
I
interrupting.
just love that these ministers are like all so petty and like fighting with each other or criticizing each other about who's wearing a periwig to the service this morning. 'Cause, I mean, I'm sure it was cold in those buildings
Hmm.
in New England. Jeez.
One of the things that I liked, and this isn't for like one in particular person, but it was very gratifying to hear some of the people that just like didn't play into this, that were on trial.
Hmm.
You would hope that, like, I don't know, there's just some humanity in that, of like
Right.
people not trying to like skirt the way around stuff, just be like, no, like, I'm not a witch. This is absolutely ridiculous, and
Hmm.
holding to that to the very end.
Mhm.
Like just the whole time.
John Alden was one.
Yes.
Captain Alden. He was in it.
And like, I think just hearing those stories, like, I hope we gave those poor souls a little bit of energy from our timeline, because like that is like, you'd hope that's what all of us would do in that situation,
Yeah, and to pick up on something that Nick was saying a little bit ago, like this didn't happen suddenly,
Right.
like the Salem witch trials, which our pivotal witch situation in America. Part of what was putting the witches into the consciousness of the people in Salem and Boston and the surrounding areas was the book that Cotton Mather wrote. It was the book that his father, Increased Mather, wrote, where he describes what he calls remarkable providences. Some of them are witch stories that are very much like the witch stories that Cotton wrote about. The preachers in the churches were preaching about the devil. They had a whole big thing that the devil had designs on New England. They were like the center of the universe. Like,
oh yeah,
Cotton's main character syndrome. But it was like the Puritans. Their belief system was that us brave people over here who are trying to, civilize the pagans who are, like devils themselves, which was, what they considered the Indians to be. And they were very literal in that Satan or the devil has designs, wants to take over this country, and we're fighting. What we're doing now is we're fighting Satan. And now Abigail Williams is possessed, now Goody so-and-so is possessed. Now, your cousin's possessed. And and just like he said, it was going to happen. It did. Yeah. And the Mathers weren't the only ones who believed in devils. Like most of the church-going people, I think believed in devils or the devil or witches or, however you want to frame it. But
it's wild too, because like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Obviously, like you could be talking about it.
That's the other thing.
You could be talking about a lot of it, not just with witches, but just things in general. Like that is such like it happens other places, but that's such a trope throughout American history of basically using those kind of fear tactics to hold people together and get things done. And one of the things that you talking about the trials especially reminds me of is we had Thomas White on at this point again a few years ago, and he told us a story that I had heard but never in great detail about where William Penn, are you familiar with when William Penn not pardoned a witch in Pennsylvania before Salem?
Tell me the background a little bit.
So basically long story short, there was this lady who was again accused of being a witch kind of thing, which at the time like was in theory punishable by death kind of thing.
In theory and in practice as
well. Yeah. Right. But again, because William Penn, for lots, guy had lots of other faults, but he was like his whole thing was like religious, bringing religious extremists over here, basically. He wanted that freedom. So what he did was he agreed that she was found guilty of having the reputation of a witch, but not of witchcraft. And that was his way of like satiating both the church people, but also having to hang this poor, in his mind, like a poor woman.
Yeah, it's kind of like a plea deal sort of.
Right, exactly. But
she was following the spirit of the witch, if not the letter.
Right. Yeah, that's right. But I think that's a good example, though, of like there are people in power who, at the time, contemporary to the Salem witch trials, like it's not like everybody is like literally afraid of witches, So,
well,
but I just think that's an important part.
Well, historically, again, if you're only familiar with like the Crucible and the Salem things, and I want to get away from Salem just because, but if you were only familiar with that from just kind of the more accepted stories, the things that have kind of that you read about in high school and everything. If you've been exposed to any level of it, that's your level. I always am uncertain how to pronounce his last name, but Samuel Seward or
Hmm.
Sewell
So
was
yeah.
comes off as one of the more sympathetic figures because
Yes. Hmm.
certainly he's equally as earnest in his beliefs, but he is one of the first at that level that seems to really start to doubt or at least want to pump the
Hmm.
brakes a little bit. And
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, he was the first and pretty shortly thereafter to apologize for his
Right.
actions in the whole thing.
Right.
And
Hmm.
my interpretation has always been, and please set me straight if I may be in error, but the actions like that created maybe some sense of communal shame because I can imagine how
Hmm.
the people would get fired up because when you
Hmm.
hear these stories, when you see these really dramatic and passionate scenes in public, it just seems like it's no wonder this became such a community thing. It's just
Hmm.
it's hard to deny.
Right. Right. Yes, they
And
definitely. Yeah. Hmm.
I feel like there's a shame afterwards,
Hmm.
and I feel like it dies down for a while and then it comes back around again. I don't know
Hmm.
if that's an accurate interpretation of the historical record in your opinion.
I think so. I mean, he wrote like an apology to the community for his part in uh, the witchcraft trials and the convictions and people dying. And he felt that that was something he was going to have to answer for. And he said, he said that I'm ashamed, but he didn't say I don't believe in witches. He wasn't that extreme. He definitely did believe in the devil and witches, but he was willing to get out there and see, yeah, this really wasn't right. And this got out of hand, and I wish I'd never been involved in it. And
And that doesn't seem
yeah.
common for the
Hmm.
time. Like nowadays, or in modern times, when people commit some sort of a public
Hmm.
faux pas, there is like the apology tour that they go on for certain
Yeah.
things, and we don't really have that as much back in the day. So if
Hmm.
he's doing this, we can assert that like he's probably legitimate in his sorrow in that sense, and that's
Yes.
that that
Yes.
that says
He
something.
was he was definitely in
Earnest,
earnest
yeah,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, his diary is very interesting. If you haven't read it, it's very entertaining.
I
It talks.
do want to read it.
Yes, it's fun. Like his wife dies, or everybody's wife
Or
dies,
is that I was gonna say,
Well,
but
is
it's
that what you're
weird.
trying to
It's
say?
basically
It's
like
fun.
National Lampoons, you know.
he really gets into like his dating problems,
Oh,
of
that's kind of
going to
fun.
see
Yeah.
this widow or that widow, and you know, uh, back then, like when your wife died, it was like practical matter. Like you needed another
Right.
wife, like
Hmm.
fit that role, as fast
Hmm.
as possible, because dinner wasn't going to cook itself.
Yeah,
So,
you definitely depended on one
mhm.
another a lot
Yeah,
more than
yeah.
Hmm.
oh goodness.
Hmm.
There was something I was going to follow up with that, but
No, sorry.
I'm just, no, 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 do not be sorry. I do want to read him though because I think it's funny like Brendan draws upon he's willing to be a little bit of iconoclastic in his just like
Yeah.
oh I believe in this. This is a real thing, but we went
Hmm.
too far here. I'm not sure if we were,
Right.
I'm going to have to answer to this, as you
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
shows this moderation, this willingness to question himself. And yet, as we talked about before, he was very down on Mather for being so open to
Hmm.
the wearing of wigs, which
Yes.
you would, so they're so but again, what you go to is
Yeah.
God and the religion is the focal point of everything in their
Everything.
lives.
Hmm. Hmm.
That different things such as the fashions of the era
Hmm.
are
Yes.
all
Are
these
in play.
ecumenical arguments.
Right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, things like people's diaries or their first person narratives or journals are just so entertaining. I mean, you never know what, that people are going to be getting into and what you'll learn about life in that
I
era.
will tell you one that was not. I only read excerpts
Oh,
just because, again, I think of a kind of to get a little political, kind of a social pariah for many people is Ronald Reagan. And the
Hmm.
man had the driest diary ever. He was just not just not a very interesting person. Like there were
Hmm.
no like I'm
Yeah.
not
Hmm.
a fan of the person myself, but not a lot of like he didn't seem to be the person that questioned himself very much. And
Yeah.
Right,
the
right.
diary was
Yeah.
very dry. I read about 10 pages of it out of curiosity one day, and
Hmm.
Which is fair. Yeah.
but I
Yeah,
do
that's
like
probably enough.
I love a memoir, but I think a
Hmm.
memoir is a place where people tell the best stories about
Right.
themselves
Hmm.
and they extend the greatness of those stories.
Hmm.
Whereas a diary, I think that's like where people expose their real selves to themselves
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I don't know how many people write a diary with the supposition that somebody's going to be reading it a few hundred years
Hmm.
from the day.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oops. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, like speaking of like, because I mean, I imagine when you're going through these diaries and these like firsthand accounts and everything, like I said earlier, kind of comparing them to like public records and court records and church records and everything, you probably found some things that surprised even you as someone who was already into this stuff. Like in the history of, witches in America, as we say here, um, what were some of the things that you were surprised about, like one way or the other? Like again, like outside of the Salem witch trials, because we've covered a lot of that.
Hmm.
But what are some other things about witches that you found that kind of surprised you, where you really were like, why aren't more people aware of this?
Hmm. Well, when I started the book, my idea was kind of there are just so many different, interesting witch
Hmm.
situations that have arisen in the country besides
Hmm.
Salem. But
Yes.
it's almost impossible to not put
Right. Right.
Salem in there because it
Yeah.
influenced, of what came before and what was,
Hmm.
it influenced what happened later. I didn't have like a lot of background. This, like, I had never heard about the York hex murder. And
Yes.
yeah,
Lorraine
and
Myers and all of
yes.
them. Yep.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And that was certainly, fascinating to find out about. And,
Hmm.
and kind of along the same lines, you got Booger Hole, West Virginia, where
Hmm.
there's witch problems, like around the turn of the century. Somebody like shot an old lady because she was bribing this person every night and they were getting arrested. And they
Right.
got a little cranky and shot her, I guess. I don't know. But like it is a big, like just bizarre thoughts
Hmm.
and ideas are have created some really really interesting American moments, I think.
Right, right. Well, and I think for me, when I read, especially some of those crazier stories from like the 18th century and 19th
Hmm.
century,
Hmm.
it seems like it's a mix of, again, people who are being wrongfully accused of being a witch as a vehicle for some other grievance that hasn't gotten
Hmm.
any traction,
Hmm.
or it's people that like are kind of marginalized on the fringes of society that like are just kind of like easy targets. Like I didn't see many, at least I don't remember reading many people in the book where I was like, oh yeah, that person's a witch and they were like screwing with somebody,
Hmm.
like
Right,
like
right.
the proposed worst case scenario from a lot of the accusers doesn't
Hmm.
seem to like happen. you
Right,
know
right.
like
Hmm.
not saying that everyone who has ever practiced witchcraft is not saying there's not some bad apples in there, um, but I think the average person wouldn't realize that without
Right,
without reading a book like this. Is
right.
that is that kind of your understanding of it too, or did you find a lot of like nefarious witches when you were doing this research?
I found more like colorful characters
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
just like in our like rural communities and like in cities, people believed there was a lot of folklore and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like folk healing, folk magic,
Right.
and it came like directly from, the old country to here, and different cultures would influence each other. But, uh, you know, like being ridden by a witch is a pretty universal thing
Mm-hmm.
that witches do
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. So I think definitely, that's surprising and it's also fun. One thing that surprised me when I was doing the research was I didn't know anything about Mary Baker Eddy. and
Mm.
founder, of Christian Science Church.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Can
that's
you
a
give everyone an
remarkable
overview?
story.
Yeah, can you give everyone an
Yeah,
overview? Because I remember that there's a whole chapter, I think, on
yeah,
her. Yeah,
yeah. And
the last witch trial. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
they called it Second Salem.
Mm-hmm.
What she practiced as far as her version of Christian Science, or that she
Mm-hmm.
invented, or was continuing something like the community she was involved with.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of fooling with this, experimenting with these ideas of like manifestation and
Mm-hmm.
uh, the effect on health but I mean, she was just like she was a kind of a wacky middle-aged lady
Mm-hmm.
who was like the family pariah. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she could, with cousin Mary going to come stay with you this year because we had her last year. She had like she had quite a few issues, and next thing you know, she's got like this huge following. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, church, like the Christian side, like she was from Boston, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
the Christian Science Church was built, like the original one.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. And like all this, a century plus later, a century and a half later,
Mm-hmm.
or longer, and this is like, she found it like a major religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fascinated because one minute you're looking at like this weird middle-aged lady, and
Mm-hmm.
next thing you know, she's like a leader and a founder of a major religion. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
at the time when I was reading, books about her, I was like, I'm a weird middle-aged lady,
Right. You're
maybe
There's
listen
hope
for
for you
me.
yet.
Yeah,
You find that flaw.
right.
I
yes.
do find I admittedly know extremely little about the actual beliefs of Christian Scientists. There is a
Same.
Christian
Yeah.
Scientist church. I don't know if they call it a church, but
Hmm.
where they gather.
Right.
Only a few blocks from where I'm sitting at this moment, a few blocks and
Yeah.
a story
Interesting.
down. But I do know that there was quite a bit of public discourse that was rather harsh. And of course, the Christian Science Monitor
Mm-hmm.
was
Hmm.
kind of a publication of note for some time. But
Yes, it was very respected. It wasn't like a
right,
crazy fanatical thing. Like,
no, no,
I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was
in any
news reporting.
way. But I will always remember. I believe it's a Mark Twain quote, but it might be one of those quotes that's like such a barb that it's been attributed to numerous people. But I believe it was Mark Twain that referred to Mary's writing as a
Hmm.
chloroform in print, which again,
Hmm.
that's like that is there's no
Make the case.
question where he sat.
Right. Right.
Well, the reason that this ended up in court as like being called Second Salem
Mm-hmm.
was because she and some of her followers, it was like a matter of people not being able to get along again and getting
Mm-hmm.
these feuds and being petty. And, she had like the nemesis, and she was like asking her followers to like have bad thoughts about,
Mm-hmm.
her nemesis, and maybe something bad will happen to her, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And to go to court, she was not, found guilty of trying to murder someone with her mind.
So
But
yeah, so it turns out, but again, but that's when it's so interesting because
mhm,
like we use the term manifesting now in a
mhm,
lot, not just in New Age stuff or Christian
mhm,
Science, but we use it in a lot of just like very secular pop culture ways.
mhm,
Oh,
mhm,
Um,
every
you know.
summer, my friend Katie and I we have a big conference we go to,
Hmm.
and one year she, I, and another person we work with went on a long walk, and that
Yes.
person who's my
Yeah.
supervisor, he's like, I'm gonna go inside, and we're like, well, we're not done talking. Let's just keep walking. So we walk like another like 2 miles, and that whole time we had a conversation, and it was about, she was struggling with some stuff. She was thinking about a career change because she's like, I'm just not making ends meet. I'm like, listen, I know there's this position where I work opening up. I want you to stick around. You're too good to go off into something different. Stick around.
yeah.
And we talked about three different things, but that was the focal point. And next summer, we got back together at that conference like we do every time.
Yeah.
And I told her, I'm like, do you realize like everything we spoke about on that walk? has happened. All
Hmm.
within 12,
Ooh,
like everything, like fell into place. We couldn't have planned it
that's
better.
interesting.
To
Yeah.
now, we have that walk every year.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
But
And
you're
we
a
we
lot
call
more
it the
conscious of what you're
manifestation.
saying. Yeah.
You're
Right.
very, and it's always like,
Nice.
yeah, it's
Hmm.
always like, what do we do to make things better?
Hmm.
And
Right.
but it's yeah, we're very conscious of that because it
Hmm.
was everything fell together, and we were kind of like worried, like, do we have
Hmm.
some sort of ability,
Right.
but yeah,
No.
it's so yeah, I to your point, Brendan, I do think that it's not if you think it and believe it, it'll happen, but if like you work towards it, you can set a goal, and I think
Hmm.
that's what it
Right.
really
Well,
is.
in
Hmm.
Not
I
like
compl-
let's set a goal, let's wish it will, and then let's go out and make it
right,
happen.
right. No, but I think like that's actually like an example of like the courts working properly, um,
Hmm. Hmm.
because like because we all say like intent matters because I think we all three of us probably believe intent
Hmm.
does matter,
Right.
in many things in life. But whenever you get to that story in the book and they talk about it and everything, it's like, okay, well, I'm glad that we can all agree that, intent does matter, but it is not criminally culpable, you know?
Hmm. Right.
And
Right.
and it's funny because we talk about these again, like words like manifesting now, and a lot of people don't realize that like there are roots that go the whole way back to that in that train of
Hmm.
thought. And it's kind of weaved its
Right.
way through society and everything. So
Right. It is. I mean, it's almost like a form of prayer,
it
in
is,
a
yeah,
I
way.
yeah,
agree,
yeah.
I think
but
there's a lot of overlapping.
Hmm.
is intent a thing without action? If you think of something and you're only going to think about it, I
Hmm.
would say
Hmm.
that's not an intent, that's a
Hmm.
wish. I don't think you can say there's an intent if there's no follow through.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And because there's no follow through, she didn't intend malice. They just wished for it.
Wish
Right.
right, yeah. No,
Right. I mean,
yeah, semantics, but I think you're actually
I'm
right.
sure she had her reasons too.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to argue against you on that, Nick, because I like the word intent. Um,
Sure, it's a great
but
word.
I no, but I think you're right. I think that intent is a action verb. So yeah, I'll concede that to you on that one. Yeah. So, but yeah, but yes, Susan, I think that's a great example of just like some of the things that people don't realize how like ingrained some of the history of witchcraft is
Hmm.
in our society, especially here in America. I
Hmm.
mean, worldwide, obviously too, but particularly in this book in America. What are some other like maybe like common misconceptions about either the history of witches or witchcraft in America historically that you
Hmm.
think like deserves more attention, maybe? Like maybe
Hmm.
these are things you knew about, but like the common public isn't as aware of them.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, One obvious one is that people always use the expression, people were burned at the stake,
Hmm.
as a witch. And
Right.
I mean, all kinds of crap happened in England and Europe and stuff. But
Right.
one thing we didn't do was like burn any of our witches at the stake, as far as anybody knows,
Right.
anyway.
Yeah. That
Um,
didn't happen.
Not yet.
Yeah. Right.
The
Yeah.
horrifying one was the smothering with stones for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. That's not a good way to go.
no.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, are there any other like because I think one of the things I think it gets a little convoluted because like I believe you talk about the Satanic Panic in the book, correct? Or am I misremembering that?
About the Michelle remembers kind of stuff and all that.
Yeah, right.
I didn't do a section on it, I
Oh, see, I thought there
think, or
wasn't there.
chapter
Okay,
was.
but yeah, I think it's probably alluded to. Because I thought I remembered
Hmm.
I thought I remembered at least one or two quips in
Hmm.
there about
Yeah,
that. Um,
but I mean, we should definitely not assume like this. We shouldn't say this will never happen again about anything. I think we should all. Those of us who don't realize that by now, I don't think
right. There are
ever are.
lessons. There are
Hmm.
lessons in history, in
Hmm.
all kinds of history, but in this especially. Sorry, go ahead,
Hmm.
Nick.
Well, no, I'm glad you say something like that because it's a thought that's been bouncing in my mind as I've been reading this, and I jotted just a few notes down just
Mhm.
as we were talking to try to get the thought straight. Because I read back, and as you said, Brendan, you would hope that we would act a certain way were we in that era. And I think a lot of that's wishful thinking. I don't think it's very good to ask people, what would you do in X situation?
Hmm.
Because that's such an unrealistic thing. None of us really know what we'll do until we're in that
Oh,
moment.
right, right.
Right.
What have you done in maybe a similar stressful situation? So I think about, well, what are the accusations? What are the suspicions that we have on others that we're blind to? And I think contemporarily, I have certain convictions, and I'll tell you this. I think, again, I'm not getting political. I think drugs are a very real problem in many people's
Mm-hmm.
lives. I
Mm-hmm.
think they possess people. I think they damage people. And my conviction of that is no less sincere than that of the Puritans that might maybe we're being very critical of.
Hmm.
But those beliefs have led a lot of people to disparage or slander entire neighborhoods and
Right.
entire classes of people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I look back on the history, and not just of the 17th century, but even some of these early 20th century episodes where people might assume we're beyond, well, no, we're not. People are people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
When I think about this, I think about how the the Puritans had their beliefs, and they had their magical beliefs as well, which you note.
Hmm.
But it's those folk beliefs that are sometimes prejudiced and slandered. And I just can't help but think that, drugs are everywhere, and it
Right.
is a problem. And a lot of people are suffering that. But we socially have a lot less problem vilifying people who are struggling both financially and with drugs. And I
Right.
think that is maybe one of the witch hunts of today, as
Hmm.
opposed to looking around and pumping the brakes and saying, what are we doing to remedy the problems that
Mm-hmm.
drive people to these things in the
Right.
first place? Or even just saying, are we vilifying people with any evidence? And I don't know. I was watching a whole thing about the challenges of the city of Reading, which right now is
Ah.
Pennsylvania's poorest section, is what the claim
Hmm.
was. And a person that was interviewed on the street brought up something really good, which was something to the effect of, when everybody here is trying to make it. And when you're faced with some obstacles, I don't think very many people want to be criminal, but sometimes when those are the options you have
Right.
before
Mm-hmm.
you, when you're
Got to
given
do what you got to
impossible odds,
do.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think about, just as communities,
Mm-hmm.
what are those accusations? What are those suspicions of our neighbors that we're blind to, that we're
Hmm.
perpetrating?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
again, my beliefs are no less sincere than the Puritans, that there
Hmm.
are problems.
Right. I
Am
think
I vilifying? Am I scapegoating people without evidence and without
Right.
trying to do something towards a positive end?
Right. It's easy to make assumptions, about people
mm-hmm.
or groups of people. Yeah, and I think almost everybody does that to some extent, I'm sure. But I think that's an interesting point. But I think that is part of human nature to look down on to enjoy looking down on other people. Sometimes I think that there's always an element of that, enjoying like fighting with people. Like I mean, like if you would if you're really masochist and you get
Mm-hmm.
on X and try to convince somebody of your political belief, people are just going to glom
Right.
on just for the sheer joy of making fun of you or putting you down or calling you names or
Yeah.
uh, and there's always like that element of people who want to do that just to do it.
You're probably right. I don't like admitting that, and this
Right.
is like me having the bar for things because I think of what you mentioned, Nick, and what you're mentioning, Susan, especially about like the place and time that these folks were in Salem, and I hear that and go, oh, okay, well, this is like a resource scarcity issue. Like, it's people being driven to crime in Reading
hmm
because
hmm
of a lack of a social safety net and for like what
Right.
our society has done to them, not
Right.
because they are criminals by nature. I don't like to also think that people are accusatory by nature. I believe that it's the shortcomings of society and their own demons, which I think is figurative in this sense, but I can understand like why that keeps showing up time and time again. And I think that's why when you look at Salem and you look at nowadays with witch hunts, we're not really talking about witches on their own. We're
Right.
talking about the other. We're talking about people who
hmm
are outside of on the margins of society and how we are vilifying them, how we are demonizing them, and more importantly, not just what we think, but how we interact as a society with those people and what we can learn about that. So I hope people would read this book and learn the history and think like, okay, well, what are we doing now that looks and
Right.
feels like this, and what can we do better?
hmm
Because I think you're right, Nick. We can't put ourselves in their shoes, but we can look at what's around us now and learn those lessons.
Well, we can't put ourselves in their shoes. But one thing we can also avoid doing, and Susan, you're absolutely right. Even some of the founders of the early Catholic Church spoke about, well, what can one do? And when asked what can one do in heaven, they said, well, you can take some joy looking upon the eternal punishments of those that are damned. Those are
That's what it's all
real.
about.
Which is such
Yeah.
Right.
bullshit. It's such
Those are real
hmm
statements,
hmm
but
yeah.
what I
Ugh.
think it's what I think a lot of us can do when reading these stories is look upon the people of antiquity and go, well, they were foolish. This was clearly just some sort of, but people are people.
hmm
And I think there is, just like we can look at the suffering of others and take some that Schadenfreude, and there's also the tendency to do that to historical things. And we have the benefit of all this perspective and all the discovery and all the investigation that has occurred since.
hmm
While I don't look upon many of the actions of some of the folks in these histories as good,
hmm
there's so much more to them than that. And
hmm
I just don't get so high and mighty about we're better, because these are
hmm
people. And I'm trying to be very honest with myself and saying, am I disparaging other people without very good reason? If someone's reading the history of my town 200 years ago, are they going to
hmm
look at me as though like, well, how couldn't they see that this problem they were perpetuating?
hmm
hmm It was all Nick's fault, I'm pretty sure.
It it usually is, in
I mean,
fairness.
yeah, I mean, in that person's defense, they might not be wrong.
Yeah.
but but yeah, no, but this is an absolutely fantastic book, and I think like
Thank
we're
you.
we're, we're talking about like a lot of like heady ideas that come out of some very very good research that you did. And the thing that I think that we haven't done a good job about kind of setting up tonight is like how fun the book is too.
It's a fun
Uh,
topic,
yeah, it's a fun topic. Like I
except
mean
for
the
all the hangings and
yeah,
stuff
except for all the awful, except for the
and the
worst parts.
torture.
Yeah, except for all of that. But outside of that, it's a real
It's
hoot.
super fun.
But like I mean, like well, like this, like the log line for the book is American Witches: A Broomstick Tour Through History, which is kind of like a fun, a fun title,
Mhm.
and I think you do such a wonderful and it's a very captivating job that you did, kind of like peppering in like breaking the fourth wall a little
Mhm.
bit and like just some of your jokes
Mhm.
and some of your not to say references, but just like it makes it very readable because like again for something that can be so heavy and so
Mhm.
dark, like there's lines, if anyone else out there hasn't read this and is going to, you're going to read some lines and actually laugh out loud. Sometimes it's going to happen. It happened to me. I'm sure it happened to
Ah,
Nick.
Excellent.
um and like it and like that helps you get through it though. Like I think
Mhm.
that's like
Mhm.
because if it was just like a list of awful things that happened to
Mhm.
people, like
Yeah.
I probably still would have got through it, but it wouldn't
Hmm.
have been as enjoyable. And I think that's a very unique take on this subject that still does it justice without like
Hmm.
diminishing how important parts are.
Yes. What I hope to do, and I write because I'm not, an academic writer or a researcher or scholar, but I just love history and I know how to find and use resources and enjoy so much. I just hope when I write to make these subjects like more accessible to so that somebody who's interested in history would find it readable, but also somebody who isn't, doesn't think history is
Well,
interesting.
mission accomplished. Yep.
And I have,
Except you guys love history.
oh, absolutely. I have one final question for you, and that is maybe a twofer. Is there a period or an event that you've recently become really interested in, and do you have another thing that you're planning on researching and possibly writing about in the future?
Um, well, I just recently turned in a book to History Press, and it's due to come out either the end of this year or beginning of 2027. And this one is going to be another Western Maryland oriented book, Weird Tales from Western Maryland. And I'm not sure if they're giving it a subtitle, but it's obscure, weird. Like I've written about like things like the Snallygaster and Dwayo and all like the bigger, like more well known aspects of folklore in Western Maryland. For this one, I was trying to bring out things that are a little more obscure, not people, aren't aware of. Like I found a monster in Sang Run in an area called Spook Hollow, of course, that was seen in like the 1730s by several people at the same time. And the description like of this creature, the I'm sorry, I have a cat that's running around making noises and trying to
Never
distract me.
apologize for cats.
That's what she says. There's something called a blemmy, uh, Blemmy,
Huh.
and it's like a creature, like it's like a man, but it doesn't have a head. It has like a face. Anyway, they saw something. They
Huh.
didn't call it that. There's no reason to even think that they were ever aware of like this is like one of those weird things that used to appear in like very early travel logs or books
Really?
about
Yeah.
the exotic countries. But what they describe that they saw looks very much like one of those. So that's like a colorful monster that most people weren't aware of hanging out in Western Maryland.
So
Uh,
that's wild. I love the idea that you went to a publisher and was like, "Hey, for your audience where the Snallygaster is too mainstream, boy, do
that's
I
right.
have something for you."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I
Forget
think
the
that is,
Snallygaster.
yeah, I think that is That's just, I don't know. That sounds really, really cool. Well, we're gonna have to have you back whenever that book comes
Wonderful.
out to speak about it because it sounds like it's already super interesting.
Yeah,
So
I found lots of interesting stories that I wasn't familiar with. So
that's wild.
yeah.
That's so wild. It's and like me and Nick have talked about before. We love that you and other folks like take these like very small areas and can find all of this stuff.
Hmm.
And the fact that you can do that on the heels of doing something as big as Witches in America, like that just shows the breadth of your writing and research abilities. That's pretty special, I think.
That's Thank you. That's very
Um,
generous of you to say.
but yeah, so we'll probably leave it there for tonight. But again, Susan, thank you so much for joining us again tonight and for talking to us about
Thank
American
you.
Witches, Broomstick
Thanks for
Tour through
having me.
history.
It's so
Uh,
fun to talk to you guys.
well, we really do appreciate it. This is always a blast, and again, certainly not the last time we'll be having you on the show. So.
Sounds like a
Uh,
plan. Thank you.
where for people who are interested in purchasing this book or any of your other books, like the Western Maryland one, the Folktales one, is there a preferred place that people should go besides just their local bookstore or?
Um, I mean, ideally, of course, a local bookstore,
Mhm.
but where fine books like Amazon are sold, they're out there.
They're out there.
They're
Cool.
pretty
Yeah.
easy to get, I think.
Yeah, no, which is fantastic. So, and I'll be sure to put some links in the show notes for everyone who are looking to purchase those books. But again, thank you so much,
Thank
Susan.
you.
And
Thank
I
you,
hope-
guys.
Absolutely. And if anyone out there has a story they'd like to share with us or has comments for Susan they want us to pass along, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at the Ghost Furnace Podcast or the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com.